In a world full of bad news, this podcast is a source of good news, real talk, and real inspiration. On this show, you'll hear stories of growth, legacy, and entrepreneurship. Everyday people who overcome real challenges to build something meaningful. My name is Stephen Padernacht, third generation Bronx born and raised in the real estate game. This is the Padernacht Podcast, brick by brick. Today, I am honored to welcome a friend of the show and a friend of mine, Scott Kaufman, Vice President of Alternative at Buchwald, a top agent who has spent almost his entire career mastering how to build lasting careers in media and entertainment. Scott works across crucial areas including publishing, personal appearances, licensing, music, and sports, helping talent maximize their personal brands and financial power. He was recognized by Business Insider in 2023 as one of the 32 managers and agents helping athletes forge careers in media and entertainment. Splitting his time between New York City and the Hampton Bays, Scott understands the discipline and hustle required to succeed in this high-stakes world, drawing a direct line to the grit we celebrate on this show. So, welcome to the show, Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure, and remind me to give you cash at the end for the introduction. You know, and make sure we hold on that. I want everyone to see that. I want to send it. That was phenomenal. So thank you.
What do you think when you hear people talking about you with such high regard? How does that make you feel?
I mean, I think like anyone, it makes you feel good, right? It's better than the alternative, which I've had a few of those in my career where they probably don't talk as highly. But I think it's nice, and I think I always say, we're all human beings, right? So it's always nice to hear, when people speak highly of you or they say something nice or they, feel you did a good job or, I think that's just, that's normal. Unfortunately, a lot of times in business, as you know better than anyone, you're not going to get that,
Nope.
So, when it does come around, it's always a nice thing. Yeah.
I was reminded that one of the first books my father gave me was How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie.
Great book, yeah.
And I went back to it recently, and I'm going through it, and I'm reading all of the principles, and I'm saying to myself, like, this is exactly how I go through my day-to-day. And I didn't realize that something I read when I was probably in my early 20s actually had such a lasting impression on my life because, like, I'm reading it, and it's like when you want to make people like you, you want to let them talk about themselves. You want to let them, you want to give them compliments and all of these different things. And the sincere compliments are the ones that actually move the needle. And when I do those intros, it's funny because I literally just read this the other day, and I'm like, wait a second, that's exactly what I do on the podcast. I give an intro, and I make the guest feel comfortable just to kind of break that ice. And when it's sincere, I feel like the person feels a much more comfortable space. Like they're in a much more comfortable space. Does that make sense?
1,000%. I mean, I think a lot of, and especially as you get older and you meet more people and you have more experiences in life, you can tell when somebody's, bullshitting you or not, right? So when it is sincere, it feels good. There's no question.
That might just be a New York quality, though.
Probably is.
Because we can sniff out a bullshitter.
Probably, yeah. I would say so, yeah. It definitely, right. Definitely New York-esque. Yeah.
But yes, as age and the fact that we are from New York and we could smell a bullshitter helps.
Even, you're right, because people have moved here from other states that have been here a long time. Even though it may not have been innate, they get that quality and that trait. Yeah. So.
Now, you are from Long Island, correct?
Yes.
Nassau County?
Yep.
I think you said the town of Syosset.
That's right, yeah.
And so, but I met you in Marist College through a very close personal friend of mine. Big shout out to DJ Wonder, Chris Dolan.
Shout out, yep.
So how did you end up in Marist College coming from Long Island? Because Marist College is all the way upstate New York.
Yeah, there's a couple of factors that were interesting with it. So the first college I went to was Miami University, so Miami of Ohio. Right?
Wait, not Miami Hurricanes.
No,
not the Miami Hurricanes.
No, that was the whole. They I don't know if they still have. They had a T-shirt that said, Miami was a college before Florida was a state. That's how they differentiated, right? So I went there and I had a good time. It was interesting going. We talk about, being in New York or going to really small town Ohio. And it was a big school. It was like 20,000 students. But at the time, it was the closest city was Cincinnati. Cincinnati now is everyone, right? You hear the real estate there, you know, the this, the that, all the people moving there. Back then, it was, you know, it was having tough times. So it was an interesting it was an interesting education, and I mean that, of how to really meet people from really different backgrounds, you know, and not just, okay, I may be from Long Island, you're from the Bronx, but you know what? My father grew up in Brooklyn, or this one grew. You really met people from all different states, all different walks of life, all different, you know, experiences. So I was there, had a great time, and I think it was my sophomore year or end of my freshman year where I said, you know, I really want to get into the entertainment business. You know, I think I want to be a producer. I always loved movies, TV, was a big sports fan as well. And at one point I thought about maybe a sports agent, but it was, you know, sports agent, you got to go to certain leagues. It's changed, but back then you had to have a law degree or an MBA. And so second semester, my sophomore year, I was living in a fraternity house, and, you know, and it was a great time, and, you know, great group of guys. But I was like, you know, at 19, I kind of saw a few steps ahead, and I said, I don't think I can stay here and really further my career. There really aren't too many opportunities at the time. You know, I don't know, it's a long time ago, but their communications program was just kind of, it wasn't what most people majored in. Yep. So I tried to apply to NYU and didn't get in. And then, funny enough, a family friend recommended Marist, and I went, you know, and I talk about this, and our friends know, I went to sleepaway camp forever. It's a big, huge part of my life. You know, shout out Camp Scatico. And the camp was about 35, 40 minutes up 9 near like in a town called Elizaville, near Red Hook and Rhinebeck. So I knew Poughkeepsie. I'd been going, you know, in that area for a long time. Po-town, man. And so long and the short, I was able to get in there. I transferred in second semester, sophomore year, and kind of the journey began. And you know, because they had a great communications program. I also thought, you know, I'm literally a train ride away from the city, so the internship opportunities, you know, because I thought you could have a great time in college, which I did, but there's nothing wrong with like, okay, if I want to do something, let me, you know, kind of see, you know, the macro and how do I, you know, move the ball down the field 1 inch to kind of get closer. So
was that a tough transition going from, I would say just switching almost, like you said, you were living in a frat house in Miami of Ohio, and then all of a sudden coming up to Marist and, you know, meeting new people, making new friends, new circle, social circle, the whole 9 yards.
No, it was actually it was a funny story. I was always a pretty sociable guy, you know, and I would just talk to anyone. So there was one night that I was hanging out with this crew, and I went, like, afterwards we left, you know, we left the bar, we go to the diner, you know, we have a great time. I think I picked up the tab, and I kind of was like, hey, great hanging with you guys, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of disappeared, and a friend a few years later told me, they were like, did anyone know that guy? Like, do you know him? Is he in, like, you know, your comm class? Is he in your dorm? Like, you know, so it was pretty good. I mean, I met, you know, look, I was very fortunate. I met a lot of people. Our group of friends would be junior, senior year, and now I've been friends for, you know, almost 20 years. But I met a lot of good people there, you know, and had a lot of great experiences, and you know, very welcoming. Like, just you can kind of hang out with everyone, you know. So
and you so you finished your communications degree there. What? So like I was a communications major also in public relations.
Right.
What was your what was your degree in?
Yeah, so it was communications, concentration in radio, TV, film.
Radio, TV, film.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But from a representation side, am I correct? Or is it just in general?
No, just in general. Just I wanted to be a producer. I wanted to try to, you know, I was never a performer. I was never in front of the camera. I thought behind the scenes. So I wanted to be a producer, you know. So that was the, you know, kind of the, you know, but the communications program, to your point, Steve, I took PR classes. I took, you know, so they really had a well-rounded you know, kind of program there. So
one of my favorite classes that I took as a PR major was the TV class, where we had to make a makeshift sort of set. And like one person was a producer, one person was here, and you were in the booth and you were learning the stuff. Yeah. What we did was our project at the end of the semester or whatever was reenacting a version of the Jerry Springer show. So you had, and this is when Jerry Springer was like
Oh, yeah.
huge,
Oh,
right?
yeah, sure.
So, like you had one guy who was like pretending to be Steve, the bouncer. And then so it was really cool to like experience that. And, I guess I've always had a bug for media also. I mean, shit, I've got this podcast here. We're sitting here in front of these cameras in the studio.
It's a great setup.
So like I've always had that bug too. But for me, like I found public relations kind of backwards because I didn't know what the hell my major was going to be. And I walked into I think it was like pre-calculus class. And I walked in and I was like, they handed out the syllabus and they started saying everything. I legit walked out of there before the class was over. I went directly to the counselor's office. I said, give me whatever major does not include math or this class. And somehow she was like, all right, then you got to do communications. And then it was like, do you want to do marketing or public relations? And I just felt that public relations was more, she explained that it was like communicating without having to pay for advertisements and telling your story. So that kind of like led me down that path. And I feel like I use it every single day of my life without even knowing it. And do you feel the same way? Like your major, like even though it wasn't about becoming a talent agent, now do you see that those kind of things that you were based on in the beginning showing up in your everyday life?
It's actually funny. We actually have a similar story. When I went to Miami, Ohio, I thought I was going to be an econ major, right?
Economics.
Yeah. And I thought I'd want to maybe be a doctor or something, right? That all changed when I dropped out of a math class and had to pick up a credit. I took basic ice skating. Now, I played hockey when I was younger, so I excelled at the basic. I'm not joking. I took basic ice skating. And I remember I was like, I'm not smart. There's no way. There is not a chance that I'm like, what the hell can I do? And then somebody, same thing about communications. I'm like, yeah, whatever, fuck it. Sounds great, So to your point, very similar. I'm not joking. It was like, what kind of classes do I have to take? And I was never, I think I got like a 500 on the math SAT, I mean, combined score of like 1,100. I don't know what I was thinking, but I guess I was overly ambitious. So to your point with communications, I think that it taught you a lot, like especially the PR side, right? It taught you how, and without saying to communicate, because obviously, but the PR really teaches you how to deal with different scenarios, how to address certain things, right? Really how to put out, which we didn't know it back then, right? Because you didn't have branding back then, but you're putting out brand messaging now, which you've done, and I'm not blowing smoke up your ass, you've done it brilliantly, as an entrepreneur with the podcast, which is why, I feel it's a privilege to be on here and very fortunate. So that stemming from that PR major, they really taught you the core aspects of, how to tell a story, right? And at the end of the day, especially in sales, which we're both in, I like to always say, we're talesmen. We're not salesmen, right? Or we're talespeople. We're not salespeople. We're going to tell you a story that you're going to like. You're going to get into it. You're going to be, you're going to see we're passionate about it, telling the story. And I think that stems from those core classes in PR and marketing that fell under, the communication school. Yeah.
And at that point, we had zero idea. I had zero clue, like, what the hell I was taking. I was like, what the hell do I need to know this for? Like, my senior thesis was on Viagra as a product. We had to take it and do a whole PR campaign. And I did that, my entire thesis on that. And I ended up not finishing it. And I ended up getting the permission because I was able to communicate very well to the school at the time to let me walk because I was going to finish my degree in that summer. I completely fucking fleeced them on that. But I didn't finish my degree until 15 years later, and I went back and I did it on my brother's political campaign as a mock sort of election. Yeah. And it was fun doing that. It was fun telling somebody's story. To your point about, talesmen, right? Like it was fun telling the story and figuring out how you're going to communicate it. And I think that you just have to have that personality.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think my thesis was we did something with two classmates for the New York Military Academy to come up with a marketing campaign, and it was great because we came up with creative. We had to do a voiceover radio ad. We had to present in front of the executives there. So I had no idea what I was going to do when I graduated. I'm not, I knew that communications not putting was a lot easier than any of the other, shit that you could major in. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I can, funny enough, I graduated cum laude, walked across the stage with the sachet or whatever the hell parents are over the moon, only to get a letter a few weeks later they were revoking the honors because my final grades came in and they said, I couldn't stop laughing. I thought it was classic. I was like, but think about like that from a PR marketing perspective. Who gives a shit? Everyone saw it. They think it's true. Yep. I'm an honest guy, so I want to tell everyone it didn't happen. But at that moment, nobody knew. I got a letter. It's like, okay, we'll throw that in the draw, So, but it was one of those things, though, to your point, Steve, that again, you learned a lot of the core essentials for how to communicate a message, how to tell a story. Anyone can talk, but and talk to anyone. But there is also, you made a really good point. One of the most important part of sales is listening, right? Is what is show interest in the individual you're talking to. Listen to them. Listen, not only what they want, what they need, but who are they? Ask all those right questions. And I think that starts, you do learn that. It's not something that's just innate. It took me a long time to learn it. So
for me, when I finished college, my story, and I've told this before, but essentially I graduated with a PR degree, not even because I didn't really finish. But I told the story to everybody that I did, and I got the pictures of me with the cap and gown. But my father basically gave me two choices, and it was like, going back to what you were saying, how you had no idea what you were going to do. My dad was basically like, listen, you have a PR degree, or at least he thought I did, and you can go down to Manhattan, and I'm living in the Bronx or whatever. I moved back to my parents' house for the first month or two. He's like, listen, go down to Manhattan if you want, get a job in public relations, we'll go work for somebody else, or work with me for a year, and I'll teach you how to never depend on somebody for a check ever again. And I was like, well, how are you going to do that? He's like, I'll teach you how to do deals. I'll teach you how to do real estate. I'll teach you how to do this. And I went to my second university for that year, and the first thing he did was give me, a couple books to read, and it was How to Win Friends and Influence People. It was The Greatest Salesman in the World, which is Og Mandino.
Yeah, sure.
And all of these different books, and I had no fucking clue that what he was doing was he was subconsciously building these values inside of me so that way they would show up at later points in my life. And I had no fucking clue. I went into real estate. I got my real estate license. That's what I did. What did you do? What was your path after college?
So
now that you got your honors taken away from you.
Man, fuck. It's like you get to see my mother's face, I
wouldn't even have shown him the letter.
I said, look, I got diploma, right? I graduated on
Did
time.
the letter go to them or it came to you?
Well, I was living at home at the time, so
they opened fucking mail.
I think they opened. Yeah, they might have opened. My parents were cool like that, but I kind of thought because it was so insane. Like when you think back on it, like but well, first before I say that, I think your father, gave you the best education possible. He took you to business school, but you were getting paid to do it, which is phenomenal. And him saying, hey, I'll teach you how to make money. I'll teach you how to do deals. I mean, that's something I think we all in business, we all chase that, of finding that mentor, whether it's, and I'm very close with my father, like, and he's been, really taught me a lot of incredible lessons in life and business, and he's a CPA. But I think, to come out of school and say, hey, look, you can go do this, or let me show you. I mean, that's priceless, man. And giving you the right books, and it's amazing how impactful those books can be.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think people nowadays, I don't know, sometimes I feel that people don't put enough stock into, hey, the takeaways you can get from books, right? So for me, I graduated from college. I start looking for a job in production. And I was telling Claudio this earlier, and you may have to work for free. And I've never had an ego. When you're 22 years old, you don't really comprehend. Like, okay, I had worked I had been working since I was 16, trying to make money, hustling, working as a busboy at a diner, working as a counselor later on when I got to level of camp, working, doing this, doing that. So, when you're being told you may have to work for free, you're like, what do I have a degree? Okay. So I said, well, that's not really going to work. Like, I need money. So at the time, I knew I was going to live at home. So somebody said you should do radio ad sales. You'd be really good in sales. So I go and I interview at 3 stations. One was in Westchester, right near Hastings on Hudson. I forgot. And the guy loved me, but he's like, listen, you're great. I would hire you in a second, but you're not going to make it. We pay you like $300 a week. You're living on Long Island, right? The other one was CBS AM, and she wanted to hire me. But I had committed to going back to sleepaway camp for one last summer to be a group leader, with a bunch of my friends and have a good time, And so I said, oh, that's not really going to work. I got to have a commitment. I wasn't going to bail, which, like I said, those guys are my best friend's family, and I'm still close with the family that owns it. So, I wasn't gonna bail on them last minute. So then I got an interview with the Long Island radio group, and again, hit it off. I think I was 3 for 3 on job offers. I want to tell the audience this. These were not like job offers like 50, even 50, 60, 100 grand. It was like, and I'll get to that in a second. It was, it wasn't what you think. So I don't want to think
minimum wage.
Right. It pretty much, right? Yeah. So
if
the head of sales, she was pregnant, and she's like, this is perfect. You can start after Labor Day because I'm going on maternity leave. This was May. Like, I'll be back after Labor Day. I'm like, sold. Mm-hmm. And I remember she said to me, she goes, the salary's $800 a week, and plus commission. I'm like, I'm rich. Like, that's incredible. So I'll go up, have a great summer up in Elizaville, come back, start after Labor Day, come in. He said, yeah, made a mistake. It's not $800 a week. It's $500 a week, which is a big, do the math. That's a big difference. That's over 15, right?
For sure.
So then I find out, actually, I'd gone in during the summer. I took a day off, and I went in for almost a day or two to train, right? And I find out, and I have nothing bad to say, but I still have people I know there, and I'm sure things have changed. It's been almost 20 years, but they didn't give you a computer. You had to bring your own computer, right? I didn't have a laptop, so I literally had a desktop, right? Mm-hmm. Which was very awkward when I resigned 8 months later, and the elevator was broken, and I literally had to carry shit down the stairs, the tower to the car, come back up, get the screen, go back, And it was almost like it was comical because I was like, "Hi, me again. I'm trying to get out of here," And they didn't pay for wear and tear on your car. My car got broken into. They didn't pay for gas, but
typical sales job.
Yeah, it was at that point, you're driving. I was literally driving all over Long Island, and I'd be gone all day. But the most valuable lesson that I took away from that job, which I still tell younger folks today, is it taught me how to cold call and do business development. That has carried me through, and we'll talk more about kind of the path I took. But I literally would pick up the phone, and remember, you're selling people something they don't necessarily need. Okay, you're also selling them, remember, air. Okay, literally, there's nothing tangible. If they don't turn the radio on at 11:03 and 45 seconds, they miss the ad, right? So I would cold call. I would go to places. People would say to me, "Get out of here. Mm-hmm. Get the fuck out of here." And but the more rejections you got, you're literally just as enthusiastic in the first call as you are on the 100th call. And so that was the greatest, for me, business training lessons that I could have learned, was how to do business, how to prospect, how to do business development. To your point, Steve, how to listen to people of what they needed, what were their advertising goals, their marketing goals, things like that. And that's, that's how that's kind of how I learned, I learned.
Who were you selling to? You were selling to businesses? Was it B2B?
You were selling B2B. You were selling to businesses, all different types of businesses, restaurants, corporations.
I imagine that you guys had a hit list. Like they gave you a list of people that you were focused on. You didn't just open up the yellow pages?
No, they didn't do that. There were no
yellow
leads.
Pages.
When I first started there, I got a few nasty notes at my desk, from senior people, stay away from this account. And I'm like, fuck, how am I supposed to? And I didn't say anything. I would just laugh it off. But internally, you're kind of like, how the hell am I supposed to know that you have that account? There's no list. So I would go through the newspaper. I would be driving on Sunrise Highway, and I'd see grand opening for that's how you did it. My boss would leave me leads. And you would literally call up. And it was, I think back now, I don't know if they do that the same way now because it's a different world technologically and you have social media. You can do, but it was like, and you'd get like incoming calls and 99% of them would, you'd go and do 100 meetings and they'd say, I remember one, I don't remember the name of it. It was a hotel company. And she's like, we're going to do, one ad for $400. And I'm like, I can't sell you that. And she goes, what do you mean? I fought for this. I said, ma'am, $400, you're going to get nothing. It's going to be one ad.
That's going to be at 3 a.m.
One time. You're never going to get anything. I'm not going to sell you that. Well, I fought for this. I said, well, I'm sorry you fought for it, but I want to do right by you. She wasn't a client. She wasn't a customer, But I said, you're not going to get anything out of it. So you want me to just take your $400, because I was always, and that was another thing with me. I always wanted to, be honorable and have integrity in business and be transparent and be honest. And, I could have taken the 400, but I didn't want to. Like it wasn't going to work. So, you literally go, 100, you drive 50 miles, I'm making no money. I'm living at home. Fortunately, my parents didn't charge me rent. And so that was my first job out of college. And again, that set the foundation for, business development and cold calling,
So I want to just fast forward just a little bit. But so one of the items that we talked about in your amazing intro was that you are the vice president of alternative at Buchwald.
Right.
So how do you go from selling B2B radio ads to now representing, at this point in your career, representing people who are potentially famous in their own rights and helping them tell their story?
Do we have time for this? I'll give you the rundown.
Yeah, give me the rundown.
Okay.
We do have time for this.
All right. So
I told you this is your episode as much as it is mine.
I mean, I could sit here talking to you for hours, so you may want to kick me out.
Well, we do have the time.
My wife's like, "Stay as long as you want, long as you want." So I'm like a bad comedian with these jokes.
It's all right.
But so what happened was, I'll never forget it. I was sitting. I'm at the radio, the radio ad sales job. At all this time, I'm looking for a job in entertainment, and it's the same thing. It's, they have to work for free. Again, telling Claudio earlier, they didn't pay interns back then. Now they do, So I'll never forget this. I'm sitting on the couch with my father watching Entourage. It's a Sunday night, and I said to him, not to be the cliched, but that's what happened. I said, I think I got to just go for this. I said, I think you let me live at home. I'll get a part-time job. I worked for him at times part-time, doing, different menial tasks. I said, you're not charging me rent. I think I just got to go and start working for free on film sets and meet people and whatever. So I go in like that week and I say to my boss at the time, this was a new boss, the old one, I didn't get along. She wanted me fired. He liked me. He took me under his wing. Shout out Darren DePrima. He's still there. Greatest guy. He was an incredible boss. Really taught me a lot of, great life lessons. It's funny thinking about it. At that time, he was like 35, 6 years. I'm 41 now. 6 years younger than me at the time. But I remember I went into him and I said, I think it's over, man. I think, I don't want to. I want to go on and do other things. And he was he couldn't have been nicer. Couldn't have been more supportive. Again, you could leave that day.
Yeah.
Take the computer, the whole thing. So I start working on films.
Take your computer with you.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, like it was, literally and figuratively, get out and take the computer. So I start working on film sets for free. Then I get a job the summer of 2007. So that summer, producing for a guy named Gary Knoll. And I don't know if the audience knows Gary Knoll, but he's a health wellness kind of guru, had a radio show, was producing documentaries, is definitely a lot of different opinions out there. But, remember Craigslist?
Of course.
So I was applying through Craigslist.
Yep.
And I apply, I'm sitting in my dad's office and I apply, right? And it says $800 a week. I said, holy shit, I'm 23. So I get a call literally an hour later, say, hey, we saw your application. Can you come up to the office? I said, yeah, sure. They were on the Upper West Side. Now, I'd been dressed nice. It's great. Go up there, right? Have a meeting with Gary. and this other woman who was also like trying to get the job. And she was like a big radio producer. She had like all these credentials. And as far as her telling me, and all I had was the short film that I had produced at Marist College and, working on film sets for free. So we go in with Gary, whole thing. She's talking. I'm not saying much. And so he said, if you guys want this job, if you go home and watch my films, if you want this job, you call me on Monday and you'll have a one-on-one interview me. So I go home that weekend. It's like alumni weekend up to camp that weekend, and the following weekend my friends are going up. I said, I'll see you guys next week, and I'm going to go home and I'll watch these films. I go home, watch the films. I remember my parents were away that weekend. My brother's time to work at the camp, so I'm home alone. So I'm taking like copious notes, whatever, really detailed notes. So I call on Monday. I said, love to have an interview. It's like rinse, wash, and repeat. Can you be here at 2 o'clock? I'm like, yeah, sure. Shower, suit. Parents live down the street from the Long Island Railroad, jump on the train, jump on the subway up to 86th Street. He was on 89th, right? And go in. So I see the other woman. I'm like, fuck. She got here before me, right? And she said to me, I said, how'd it go? She's like, well, I hope you watch the films. And I got this binder with all the notes, right? And I said, well, it was really nice to meet you. I hope, our paths cross again. So the director of operations comes down. He says, Gary will be a few minutes. He said, what's that in your hand? I said, I took notes. He's like, he's going to love that. 5 minutes later, the guy comes out. He goes, can you start tomorrow? I go, what do you mean? I didn't even meet with Gary. He said, yeah, but what Gary said, that woman, she didn't watch the films and she was just bullshitting me. And he said, get that other guy in here. And that was it. That literally didn't even know my name. So I was there for a bit, producing, getting paid well, really producing, some pretty profound documentaries. I mean, he was ahead of the curve on a lot of things, on kind of calling out, if I remember, PTSD, and calling out, doing a film about the dangers of prescription medication, which ended up,
the opioid crisis,
right? Way before the but a couple of years before the opioid crisis, and so
when you say you were producing, what exactly does that mean? Like, in other words, he had, you said he had a radio show. Like, what was your what was your day to day like?
That's a great question. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm not joking. I was producing films and TV, like PBS TV specials. My job would be to line up the interview guests, to get the right footage, to oversee the editor. Did we get this? I had no business. I mean, you talk about fake it till you make it. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I worked hard and I just, so I was there for a bit. He really treated me very nicely. And I made one of my, actually walking over here, a buddy of mine texted me who I met there. He's an editor and we've been friends to this day. Me, him, his wife, my wife. I've known him for almost 20 years now, 18 years. So I left there and I go into freelance producing, right? And it's just not work, So I can't
freelance producing, meaning that you're a producer and you're trying to raise.
I'm trying to raise money. I'm trying to do this. It's not, I'm getting an odd job here and there, produce a music video for, here's $800. So this goes back to that business development. So somebody said to me, you'd be a great agent, right? So I think it was one of my best friends' brothers, a guy named Brad Gallo, who's now a very successful producer. And he helped me write a cover letter and whatnot. He really, and I'd grown up with them in Syosset, so he was very helpful to me. And shout out to Brad. So I cold called like every single agency in New York. Not even emailed. William Morris at the time was William Morris Agency. You had to you sent your resume in via fax.
Yep.
This is like 2008.
I remember the fax machines.
It wasn't so. Long and the short, only one agency got back to me. They offered me an internship 2 days a week, $25 a day. I said, I'm going to take it. I went in every day. Every day I would go in there to work.
Well, it wasn't like they were paying you a crazy salary, so you just...
They paid me only the 2 days.
Yeah, so they were looking... They wouldn't have minded you coming in and working more for free.
But within 6 weeks, they promoted me to be an agent.
There you go.
In commercials and try to build like a literary division. And they said to me, you'll learn and we'll help you. And I'll never forget, I was getting paid $250 a week plus commission. I couldn't have been happier. Suit every day, commuting in from Long Island, had my strap over briefcase, whatever, that. And that was like the start of it. And then I from there, since then, since I'm 24 years old, I've either been an agent or a manager my whole career with different stops along the way. You know, you course correct a bit, you kind of, but it was that started my career. You know, really in the talent representation business, and it was incredible. Yeah,
that story, that just the fact of you taking $25 a day. Did you say?
$25 a day.
$25 a day, 2 days a week, and you were like, nah, I'm going to go in every day and I'm going to prove who I am, what I can do, and learn the business. And then you said 6 weeks later or 6 months later?
No, 6 weeks later.
6 weeks later, they're like, you know what? And what that tells me, what I'm hearing, and now now running various businesses, I'm always looking for talent, right? And I may not always be in the position to pay them or whatever the case may be, but when talent arises, you find a way to fit them into your world, and that's what you did. You found a way to show, hey, look, I'm hardworking, I'm talented, and then from that, it led to a career that now has spanned how many years?
About 17 years.
17 years, yeah. I mean, another 3 years, you could retire. You get a pension.
Yeah, pretty much. If I do that, if you need me to do laundry here or sweep up, call me. I'll be around. But it was interesting because I really didn't know what but think about it, right? And this is 17 years ago, right? And it wasn't a lot of money then, but think about it. I went from making $25 a day, 2 days a week, $50 a week, to $250. I mean, think about that. You know, I literally I was making now 5 times the amount of money, right? I mean, a week plus commission. Yep. So there would be weeks, 8, 9. I mean, and I was still living at home. I didn't have that issue. You know, a lot of people are quick. They want to move out right away. I didn't have that issue. I was fine. All my friends lived in the city. They would literally, rock, paper, scissors to see whose couch I would sleep on that weekend. Yep. And that's kind of how I did it, And a good point to your point, Steve. I'll never forget. It was a Friday night. The owner, and I want to be clear. It was a small agency. Okay, this was not. It was like 4 or 5 people. It wasn't
the stepping stone.
Right. This wasn't like holy shit. There's 500 people in there. But I'll never forget. The owner of the agency called on a Friday. I was the only one in the office at 8:00 at night because I was going out that night. So I picked up. She's like, "Oh wow, thank God you're still there. I can't find the directions to the show, a theater show I have to go to." And I'm like, yeah, no problem. So that was a great example of, talk about ego. What ego? I'm making $50 a week, okay? The Long Island Railroad at that time was like round trip. I think was, $20, if you caught the off-peak, train.
Half your salary is going
right, and then you had, like, the subway had the $5 footlongs. You get right. I'm not even joking. And I had friends. Remember, at 24, and you had friends already. They were making, some of them. You're 2 years out of college. Unless they were in grad school or law school, some of them they were making 40, 50, 60, 70 grand a year already. Yep. And I'm making $50 a week plus working part time. So that kind of led to. That led to
your path as an agent.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And you so the company that you're with now, Buchwald. Yeah. I pronounced that correctly, right?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you work your way up to did you get hired as vice president or did you work your way through that as well? Because what I'm hearing as far as your story is like you followed your passion and you took these sort of odd jobs and opportunities at $50 a week or whatever it may be to find something that lights you up inside. And at Buchwald, how did you work your way up to becoming vice president?
So so I say around 17 years because there was 1 year I kind of took off and I was trying to be a startup guy. I think it was right after like Shark Tank came on the air and I thought, right, and I was literally, I was the co-founder of every company that made no money. I mean, it was just a phenomenal, it was ridiculous.
Nothing wrong with that, man. You got to try things.
I mean, well, it's interesting. Like before I get it, I heard a quote from a CEO once. I kind of put my own spin on it. His mother said this, and she said, in your 20s, try everything. In your 30s, figure out what you're good at. In your 40s, and this is my spin, your 40s, 50s, early 60s, make money from what you're good at. And like, your late 60s, 70s, try not to work too hard, right?
Yep.
So I literally was co-CEO of, and I would make deals with platforms and we would get equity, but there'd be no money. And you're like, I just got to raise, $5 million and I'm going to get this, or, if they sell this, and excuse me. And back then we didn't have wasn't the same, entrepreneurial. I think you've always had entrepreneurial, entrepreneurs and great entrepreneurs. But I mean by that is like, it was a different world. It wasn't the same, it was, I don't know, it was just a different world. It was a different time. And I was a different person. And I'm learning as I go, and you're trying to, so long and the short, I had helped kind of start this media company. And again, I think I'm back to like making like $200 a week. Now I'm like 25, I think 26. I just moved into the city. I lived at a railroad apartment on 89th and 3rd. And for those in the audience who don't know what a railroad apartment is, basically a big apartment that goes like straight through, there's
You're walking through bedrooms to get to the next room.
Yeah, pretty much, right? You're walking.
Very uncomfortable apartment.
Put it to you this way: when like the earth shifted, I'd have to shoulder the door to get in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was the pipe building. You get buzzed up, and it's like 2:30 in the morning. It's like, hey, can I bum a cigarette? And you're like, yeah, I'll be right down. Right. So, again, business development, cold calling. I had reached out. So we were consulting, right? We were consulting with authors on how to use social media to promote themselves. And I kind of spun off and started doing my own thing. So I had like a dermatology office. I had a few clients that were paying the bills. Now at this point, I'm making $500 a month here, $600 a month there. Nothing great, but I'm I'm bunting pretty much.
Yeah, it's all right.
I'm not even hitting singles yet. But I reach out to the president of the LA office of Buchwald, who kicks it over to, and hopefully everyone can follow this, kicks it over to at the time the executive vice president, head of the commercial voiceover department, who reaches out to me. Okay, she's writing a book about her and her son. She's still a dear friend of mine to this day, and she's like, "I'd like to meet with you." So she ends up hiring me and paying me to consult for her.
Okay. Separate, not like
Separate,
at Buchwald.
nothing to do with Buchwald. So then she tries to get me into Buchwald to oversee social media, right? At the time, whatever, they didn't see it, fine.
Mm-hmm.
Then she tries to get me in as an agent. They said, he'd been an agent already, he doesn't have enough experience, So now I'm getting towards the end of the year. This is 2010. Clients are dropping off. They're just like, you're phenomenal. Like I remember the dermatology office, they were terrific people. She's like, you've been amazing, but I have somebody I hired in-house and I don't think I just need the, so I'm like, what am I going to do?
Probably a lot of it revolved around just not footing the expense anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Because like I do that all the time, right? Like I'll hire a company and then I'll hire somebody and then I'll see the cost, I'll see the deliverables, and then I'll try to, as a business owner, lower my expenses by figuring out a way that I could do it on my own without having to, for maybe half the cost or whatever.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just, you have to, and you being, a successful entrepreneur and business owner, you have to, you want to keep the lights on, you gotta pay the bills. There are certain costs, and I was a cost that wasn't necessary anymore. So the executive vice president, Robin Stetcher, again, still a dear friend of mine to this day, she said, look, my assistant's leaving. Why don't you come and work for me? And she gave me a lot and remember, I'm 26 now. I had been an agent. I had in between that, I had a management company. I had launched talent management. So
you worked producing shows for PBS.
Yeah, I've had like, I've had this really varied kind of all over the place in this business career, making good money, making no money. But now it's like, okay, you got to take literally, they say, right, a step back, take two steps forward. And I was like, okay. So I took the job, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made because it got me back into, from that year I took off, talent representation. It kind of really brought me to the big leagues, when you think about it, a storied agency, and I made great friends there. When I ended up leaving a year and change later to go back into management, talent management, I shared clients with them. Cut to, I'm at a company. I'm a lectures agent now, and this is 2017. The company gets sold to one of the big three major talent agencies. and I had a great time there. But I was like, I really don't want to just be a lectures agent. I want to, you know. So one of my dearest friends, shout out Max Ulanoff, he's at Buchwald, and he says, you know, why don't you come back here? You know, you still have all these great relationships, great friendships. And long and the short, I don't want to get too much into the details, but something had happened at the other company that I felt, you know, I felt like I was slighted with something. I wasn't asked to attend a meeting, and like, you know, I guess that's where maybe a little bit of ego, but I was kind of hurt that I wouldn't, you know. And I remember I came home and I said to my wife, you know, I don't care what it takes. In 2 to 3 weeks, I'm going to have another job. And I go in to Buchwald. I meet with Don Buchwald, rest in peace, who passed away last year, who was, you know, I was very close to, and I really considered a mentor, just a spectacular guy. I mean, they don't make them like that anymore. And I went in, and I knew him from my first tour there. And I went in to meet with him and the GC COO and my buddy Max, and we go into his office and we're having a great conversation. And I'll never forget, he said, why don't we go next door to the Cornell Club and have a drink? And the funny thing about Don was, you know, it's because the building, and it's our building that we own, is attached to the Cornell Club. Don went to Brooklyn College. He wasn't a Cornell grad, but he was a member there. And it was great. So I say to Max, I'm like, shit, I got to go. I was a member of the Friars Club at the time. I got to go. I got a dinner there, though. He goes, yeah, something like, I highly recommend you tell your friends there you're not going to make the dinner. Mm-hmm. So I text my friend, I'm like, we go to the Cornell Club, have this incredible time with Don. We're laughing. He's telling us the greatest stories. Later, I found out, and this is what really a true leader is, and true, he wanted to see how we got along, me and Max. Mm-hmm. Right? He wanted to see our dynamic. Yep. And he said it felt like him and a colleague, and it was just so easy. And the next day, he said to Max, we're going to make Scott an offer.
And Max was your friend that had
Max
brought
was my
you
friend, who still to this day, one of my closest friends.
And that's how you ended up back at Buchwald.
That's how I ended up back there. And have been there, you know, I started there May 1st of 2018 and have been there ever since. So you're talking, you know, getting closer to 8 years than 7 years now, 7.5 years. So,
do you remember the moment in your life where you said, you know what, this is the work that I want to do for the rest of my life? This is the work that I want to make my career.
You know, it's a great question, Steve. I don't know if there was a specific, I think that I love that I got to work with incredibly talented and fascinating individuals, right, from all walks of life. And I think that probably when I was a manager, and again, after I'd left my first tour at Buchwald, I went back into management. I was buying out a company. I merged it, bigger one. Probably that, I was 28, 29. That was probably the moment where I said, I want to do this the rest of my life, because I was working with such great clients and even ones that were up and coming, and you develop these great bonds. You know, you're dealing with human beings, right? It's natural. And when you'd hear that excitement on the phone when you call a client and say, hey, you booked the job, or and I was working with actors at the time, right? Or, hey, we sold this show. That's where I knew I wanted to, you know, I wanted to stick with this for you know, hopefully the rest of my career. Yeah.
Were there what's one mistake that you might have made early on that still kind of maybe haunts you or taught you a lesson that you'll be sure not to make again?
Losing my cool, you know, in certain situations, yelling, you know, into the phone, you know, stupid shit, to be honest with you, not being, you know, not realizing at a young age in my 24, 25 that you're in the service business. You know, these folks are paying you a percentage of their gross income. Okay. You know, you may not always agree, and you have to be honest and be transparent because you're guiding them. But I think I think there were two things. It was losing my temper at times when I shouldn't have, and, you know, and chalking up to, oh, I'm young, when really I was just being an asshole, you know, and you didn't agree with me, well, you know, like, fuck you. And that's not a good way to do business, you know, at all. And so I do regret certain times where I would have, like we discussed at the beginning, listened more, stayed calm. my grandfather was a salesman, rest in peace, for Munsingware, and he was a spectacular guy. And he used to say that when somebody got louder, a customer, he got softer, his voice. And I should have taken that into consideration back then. So that was the first thing. The second thing was I didn't have tunnel vision back then, and I'll get into that a bit more. I looked left and I looked right, and I saw what this friend over here was making and this friend was making, and all I thought about was money. How do I make the most? And I think that's why I bounced around a bit when I was younger. Okay, I can go here and, I could be an entrepreneur and make a hell of a lot more money. So those were the two mistakes. I don't ever live with regret. I think you learn. The only time it's a loss is if you don't learn from it, or it's a regret is if you don't learn from it. And those were 2 points in my career, or two where I wish I would have, okay, again, tunnel vision, don't think about the money, don't look left, don't look right, look straight ahead at what you're doing. And again, don't lose your cool. Just because somebody disagrees with you, or they, say something you don't like, and I would have those moments where I'd have, like an asshole, a temper, temper at 24. And I remember the boss saying to me, he's like, I don't want to see that anymore. That's, we were all in one room, so it was kind of hard to hide, and you could tell I wasn't shy, But that was really, those were 2, no specific real incidents, just kind of I kind of have always been somewhat of an old soul, but I feel like I was immature in those times, and I would have preferred that I was more mature in how I acted with things. But you live and you learn. And look, I think today, right, we all in business, people piss you off, but now, right, you hang up the phone. You say, what an asshole. You don't do it on the phone. You say, okay, yep, no, absolutely, I'll get right, have a great day, hang up, what a fuck. But I think that's where you learn again to listen, to understand that you're in the service business. People are going to get angry. Our job is to solve a problem, right? Come up with a solution, not to exacerbate the argument. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wish I didn't do that when I was younger, but
My father used to say that he always used the expression that don't argue with a fool because somebody from the distance won't know who's who. So if you're just, not to say that the person that maybe you were raising your temper to was a fool, but when you just continue to go into the argument and to engage in the argument, nothing positive is ever going to come from it. So I like to take a step back, and you know what has helped me tremendously lately, and you're going to probably find this funny, especially knowing me for so long, is that I started meditating. In the mornings. I have this app, it's called the Calm app.
Yep.
10 minutes in the morning, I sit in the sauna and I meditate, and it allows me, through a stressful day, to be able to get through it and not affect myself inside. And it helps me tremendously not to engage in those moments when I want to raise my temper.
No, I don't think that. I think that's fantastic, man. I think that's great. I think that's
a lot of woosah.
Yeah, a lot of
woosah.
And if any executives at Calm are listening, your next sponsorship's right here, okay? So, you just got a huge shout out.
A lot of woosah.
No, but you're right. But I think that, for me, I play basketball, and it helps me escape, In addition to, my wife and I have an awesome time, and we go, wow, we have great, but you're talking almost like to your point, almost like mental health things you can do. Yeah. My wife got me into, you find it maybe funny with me, acupuncture.
Dude, that's amazing.
And it's not only from the actual physical health aspects, but from a mental health standpoint too. And I think what you're doing is really smart. And some of the greatest business leaders currently, they meditate. Yep. I've heard some of the top executives say they're in an interview. Right, rapid fire questions. What's the first thing you do in the morning when you wake up? Meditate. First thing I do is meditate.
Yeah.
Okay, they're just coming. So I think it's great, and I think your father. Look, the advice your father has given you is spot on. But you learn that with experience.
Only
you learn that stuff like that can't be taught. You have to learn. To your point, it's and maybe the person was being a jerk, but what am I wasting my time for? Right, and it's not about well, you need to be upfront. Don't just placate. No, it's just, how do you want to take every minute of the day in business and life and do something positive? And in an argument in business, and what's it going to do? And then, and look, and nowadays, people can record you. They can, I mean, back then they didn't do that, but you don't want that. Like you have a disagreement with somebody, state your opinion, but that's it. Move on, And I've learned that with clients. I've said, listen, I don't agree with this, but I work for you. And if this is what you want to do, I will do my best to help you with it.
Well, that kind of leads me to my next question, right? So when a client has like a crazy, wild idea, I'm sure they probably have come up with a few. How do you balance like protecting their brand and helping them take a shot at something?
It's a great question. If it's something that I feel is going to be detrimental to them, that can hurt their career, and I've dealt with this before, I advise you not to do this. That, don't do it. It's controversial. It's this. Don't, or that's not who you are. You're not known to go viral, going on a rant. So you gotta, when it's a creative idea, look, you walk that. Here's the thing. It's hard to tell people no, that idea sucks, okay? Because again, you're dealing with human beings. They might have put a lot of thought. So how do you deal with that? It's, okay, listen, why don't we make this change? Or did you ever consider doing this or adjusting it here or adjusting there, right? And then it's like, look, I think this could be a tough sell, but why don't we go to 3 or 4 buyers and see what we can do? But when it's a situation where it's going to be, I feel it's going to be detrimental to their livelihood, their brand, their career, I advise against it. Don't do something, right? Sometimes, not to be cliche, but it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, expand upon the great foundation you've built, but, be mindful of, you put the wrong thing out there, it could be a problem, So those are the two different ways. When it's something creative and it's like, oh, I don't know if this will work, you try. I mean, if they really want to pursue it, be honest with them. Tell them this is going to be a very difficult sell. Here is why. However, let's go to 3 buyers and let's see what they say and go from there. And that's, I think, at least how I handle it.
Do you feel any sort of, I don't want to use the word regret, but emotional sort of feeling because you're dealing with people's lives, legacies, and brands. So like, what's the emotional cost with helping people make these decisions that could affect their brand, their future, their lives?
Look, I always say I'm a talent agent. I'm not saving lives, right? There are a lot of jobs where people are literally saving lives. But to your point, you are involved in their livelihood. It can be emotional because you don't want to see them fail and you don't want to see things go wrong. And, it's tough. It's a tough thing. You want to work with people in any job you're in that you like, okay? I think that, if you're working with somebody, no matter what business, and that phone rings in your stomach, you get that pain in your stomach, So I've been very fortunate that, and especially now my current clients, I get along with all, and you start to develop because, a personal relationship, you go for lunch, you go for a drink, you go, so it sucks when it's, when it doesn't go their way or they don't get the job or they don't, and you feel for them, especially I've always found, I believe myself to be an empathetic person and simple, you feel for them because you care. You want them to do well. You put aside the money, you want them to feel good, right? Because, they work really hard. And especially those clients that, are just really great individuals. And so it definitely, it has its moments, I mean, where you're, it's. I always try to stay positive and I'm always been a glasses half full type of guy, and I always try to stay positive with them. But it definitely has its moments where you hang up and you say, "Fuck," you feel terrible, so it's tough.
Have you ever had to tell a client like this deal is wrong, even though there's a huge paycheck attached to it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I actually say a lot. I heard this from, I don't know where I heard it. I can't remember. But I heard once, maybe I was reading a book or something, that sometimes the devil arrives with the biggest paycheck. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. I've said this is not, there's something off with these folks, or there's something not right about this, or it's smoke and mirrors, that they, on the flip side, I've had to tell clients who don't want to take a job, listen, I don't agree with you, but I work for you, and, you have to make the decision that makes sense for you. But, oh, yeah, absolutely. I do it plenty of times. I say, this is not for us. Like, this is, so, or I'll say, let's go even further. I'll say we should do this. It's not a lot of money. And it sounds nuts being an agent and it's commission-based organization, but do it this because it's going to lead to this. Mm-hmm. You also have to look at that as well. It's about looking, I say a lot, it's the macro and the micro, right? You got to look at, all different aspects of it. But yeah, absolutely. I've advised clients, don't do this job. There's something not right about it.
How important do you find, the word integrity to be in your day-to-day and how you deal with clients and how they deal with the public?
I mean, right? I always say a contract's only as good as the person signing it, and it's like the whole thing of, oh, my handshake is that's bullshit too. I mean, it's only as good as your integrity and your honor, So it's very important to me. I think look, it should be a part of your everyday life. Okay. That doesn't mean mistake kindness for weakness, but have integrity, have honor, be honest. Don't, be transparent. I mean, who gives a shit? Okay. If you're transparent and that causes somebody not to be interested in doing the deal, okay. You save, I take it from my father, who I like to sleep well at night. You know what I mean? Like, I like to, I could sleep well knowing, hey, I tried my best. I think that there are a lot of people in business, and it doesn't make them, I want to be clear, it doesn't make them bad people or evil people. They don't have integrity because it's like, listen, it's me or against everyone else, and I'm going to do what's best for me, and I'm going to do, it's just not my style. You know what I mean? I'd rather sleep well. I'd rather, know that, we did it the right way. So
do you think that your clients feel that integrity or get that from you when they're talking to you?
I hope so.
And maybe that helps them, maybe helps you get more clients and or helps you retain the clients that you do have and maybe deepen those relationships?
I hope so, Steve. I really do. I mean, I think they do. I've had a lot of clients for, some of my clients have been with me since I'm back at Buchwald for 8 years. I mean, I've continued to keep relationships even with people I don't work with anymore, that will keep in touch, or they'll call me and ask me my advice on something, or so I hope they feel that, but I can't speak for it. Look, business is a strange world, right? And people's opinions of you are going to vary. There's nothing you can do about that. As long as you feel good about it and you've done the best that you can, and you've tried the best that you can, and you take you take accountability. Like I say to a client, I dropped the ball on this. I'm really sorry. And I've had clients, ream me out, not fire me, but like, how could you, and you're right, 100%, absolutely. Let me make a call here. Because they're right. You're working for them. You dropped the ball, but it's be honest. Like, say, hey, I dropped the ball. I screwed this up. So
one thing that gets me that gets me through the days is my significant other, right? My wife. She just gets me, right? Like, she knows that I'm gonna answer the phone at 10 o'clock at night. She knows that my business is 365, and she also knows that why I'm doing it for her and for us. You are married. You've been married for over a decade. How do you balance the support system that you need at home, work, life? How does that all balance out, and how does your wife play into that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky. I mean, has been very supportive. You know, my wife is a very successful attorney, in-house counsel, one of the top attorneys in the world at what she does in intellectual property, and she's expanded her, you know, her areas of expertise to marketing and data and privacy and security. And, you know, first let me say, I'm very lucky, just period. I have an incredible wife. She's an incredible person. But, you know, she was very supportive of me and, you know, for a long time. And, you know, when I was trying to find my way and I was trying to make, you know, literally, you know, make a living. I mean, you know, when we first met, as I mentioned to you, and I'm, you know, to your audience, to the listeners, I was making nothing. I mean, really nothing. And she was already established in her career. So she's been incredibly supportive of my journey professionally, and has been, you know, my biggest fan. And from how do we balance, you know, she has a very high pressure job too, very long hours. You know, we have a great time. We laugh a lot. We go out a lot. You know, we love trying different restaurants, going to museums, hanging, you know, going with our friends, just doing different things, you know, watching, you know, old episodes of this show or that show or, you know, whatever. I mean, you find that balance because you realize that, you know, it all begins and ends with your family and friends, you know, and you gotta really treasure those relationships, you know. And so, you know, we have a great time, you know. We just, and I'm sure like you and your better half, you know, you try to do different things. You go on vacation, you go for a drive. You know, there was one time, I remember a couple times, not one, but like, you know, we're in the city, it's, you know, and as you mentioned, we have a home out in Hampton Bays, so we're out there a lot. We have, you know, I remember we used to go during the pandemic, and we were out there a lot of it, you know, at the beginning at least, and we'd go watch the sunset. We just drive over to the beach and watch the sunset. Or, is it right? So right? It's nice though, man. You know, simple things in life, you know. But
I'm gonna clip that. I'm clipping that.
but the other thing we would do, which was fun, like just rant and be like, you know, it's like a Saturday or Sunday. We're in the, you know, in the city, or sitting in the apartment. It's like, you know what? We have our car in the city, and you know, we'd say, hey, you know what? Let's look up like a random diner in New Jersey. You know, like let's go to let's go try a diner, and we do stuff like that. So I think it's really the balancing act, and it's also it's having you know, your life partner, you know, understand the stress you're under, understand the pressure you're under. But again, you know, she, you know, my wife's name is Ainsley, so I don't want to keep saying she, but Ainsley, you know, really, you know, was my biggest supporter, and really my you know, really would cheer me on, and was really, you know, I was saying this to somebody the other day. She would say to me, like when I was like leaving a job, or she'd say to me, it's going to be okay, you know, and she encourages me to follow my dreams. And, you know, again, I can't, you know, to have somebody like that, a life partner, for everyone listening, that, you know, you were at totally different points in your career, literally. And for her to be encouraging, and for Ainsley to say, keep going, and, you know, it's going to work out. I mean, what else is there to say? You know, what else is there? I'm not too good with this mic. What else is there to say? You know, I mean, and just calling it straight. A lot of, and you know this better than anyone, as a successful businessman, and you have a lot of great friends and a big network. Look, a lot of times relationships go south because one partner is carrying the financial burden, okay? And it happens. They're not putting it, it happens. You know, people, so the fact for quite a long time that I was making shit money, you know, that she kept being encouraging and would say, let's go away here, let's go away there, and never once made me feel like, you know, really, you know, like you feel sometimes, right, like a bum. You don't have, you know, you can't even get, you know, $20 out of the ATM. You know, I think that's, you know, and her personality, like I said, we have a lot of fun, we laugh a lot, and it's just, I'm very, very lucky, lucky, you know, from have a great time, like I said, watching sunsets, to go try some random diner, to, you know, travel here, and she really has been an incredible mentor, and she's taught me a lot, and she's introduced me. I had never been to Europe before her. You know, she's introduced me to a lot of things that I would have never experienced. So, you know, I'm very lucky.
Big shout out to Ainsley.
Big shout out to my wife, Ainsley Schreiber.
Absolutely beautiful.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Good question.
So there's one question that I ask every single person that's sitting in that chair,
Yeah.
and it is when you look back and when you're long gone and 50, 20, whatever years down the line, what do you want people to say about Scott? And how do you want to be remembered? What do you want your legacy to be?
I want them to say he was a great friend. He was someone who had honor and integrity. He was somebody that, if I needed somebody, he was there for me. And I want them to think about the good times and the relationships. It's a tough question. I could feel it, because it's like, you could almost feel like you get emotional from it when you think about it, because you're like, how I've always said, like, when it's all said and done, do you want people to cry and miss you and remember the good times, or do you want them to show up because they want to make sure you're dead, and like, thank God, it's about time. How do you want people to feel when your time's up? And I want them to feel, hey, he was a nice guy, and he was somebody I could depend on, and he was a great friend, and he was a great brother, and he was a great son, and he was a great husband, and he was, the memories he helped create with that person isn't in the, I'll always, they'll last a lifetime. That's how I want to be remembered. I don't give a shit about he was an incredible businessman, or he was a mogul. Who gives a shit? I mean, it's like, somebody, a high profile individual. I mean, high is, I don't want to say the name because I have a good relationship with them, but one of the, known worldwide. I remember I was texting with him about something. It was actually after it was the horrific fires in L.A. and he lost his home. He was one of many people, and I texted him and I said, "How you doing?" And he said, "I really appreciate you reaching out, Scott." He said, you come in with nothing, you leave with nothing. Everything in between is an adventure. I'm blessed, and I couldn't have. I said, "Holy shit." Imagine, and he's a very, very wealthy person, but still, you lose a house. You lose. Mm-hmm. That's never. I don't care how much money you have. You lose, right? And to think that way, and to come up with that type of philosophy. I'm getting clear. I could be through the wall soon.
You get into it.
You can keep that in if you want, or edit it out, whatever. But so that's how I look at it, right? Like. You can't take the money with you. You can't take, but what you can keep with people is who you were, and the memories you create with them, and how they want to remember you. And not to drag this, but let's be honest. There are people, again, not evil people, not bad people, but their time is up, and people are like, sorry, my condolences. They couldn't because they remembered how they were treated, and I hope people feel like, hey, he treated me well, and he was there, and even when I didn't haven't had my finest moments, which we've all had, they think I was a decent human being. So,
one of my favorite quotes is, "The saddest thing in life is wasted talent."
One of my favorite movies ever. Are you kidding?
What do you feel when you hear that quote, and how do you try to live that or bring that into your day to day?
I mean, it's that quote. First of all, Bronx Tale is one of my favorite movies of all time. I mean, for those who haven't seen it, I mean, Chaz Palminteri, I mean, just the life lessons that from that movie to this day. I think the movie's 30 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
32 years ago. I've seen it. I've actually seen it, as I'm sure you have firsthand. I have seen where wasted talent. And it's, I think that it's such a profound quote, because talent can be interpreted as so many different things, but it's almost like, you're wasting whatever that talent is to go down the wrong path, or to make. I mean, I live by that quote,
All right, so this is your camera right here.
Yeah.
What I'd like you to do is, for all of the talented individuals that are watching this, if you need representation, if you have questions regarding the industry. Tell them how to get in touch with you and any parting words.
Yeah. So best way to get in touch with me would be email. It's S Kaufman. That's SKAU. F is in Frank, M is in Michael, A is in Apple, N is in Nancy, at Buchwald, BUCHWALD.com. Parting words, I was talking to Steve earlier about this, and, there's another quote I love that is every dream started with a kid that hated to lose, right? That doesn't mean you don't accept losing. That doesn't mean, you're going to win every time. But if you don't like that feeling, you keep pushing towards your dreams. And I said to Steve before that we started this podcast, it took me a long time to make a living doing this. Okay, I didn't start making whatever your definition of a good living is until my mid to late 30s. So when you look at that, I grinded for you graduate from college 22, 13, 14, 15 years. Bernie Brillstein, who I always admired, legendary manager who passed away a long time ago, used to say, when success is ready, it'll find you. And I also think that you have to have tunnel vision. Don't look left. Don't look right. Okay? Look straight ahead. Look at your career. Be proud of what you're doing. Look at your life. Because if you look left or right, that's going to bring jealousy and envy, And last thing I'll say is, be happy for your friends, your colleagues. If you are a true friend, a true colleague, a true brother, a true sister, you are happy for other people's success, okay? Don't put on a fake smile and a fake this and then 5 minutes later, say to the person next to you, how the hell did they get that promotion? And if you do that, that's okay, but then just be honest. You don't like the person, all right? Just be true. You don't like them, okay? But if you're really a friend, real friend, always is encouraging, and they're excited for their friend's success, and they feel it like their friend feels it. And again, if you don't like them, then you don't have to be excited, but be honest. And then, don't go be calling them and hanging out if it's bullshit. So, and Steve, thank you for having me. I've been watching, your trajectory. We've known each other now a lot of years, and I couldn't be happier for you for your success, how entrepreneurial you are, how diversified you've made yourself, and how you're building upon your great foundation, and you go for it. And I think that, this is an incredible podcast for people to really have a lot of takeaways for their life, both personally and professionally. So thanks for having me on.
I appreciate that, man. And one thing that I've learned today is that you have to go after your dreams. I mean, I personally live that day to day, but hearing you tell your story and getting to know your professional story. I mean, listen, we know each other from hanging out and kind of on a surface level, but the whole purpose of this podcast is for me to bring people on here and get to learn about their stories, what drives them, what helps make their clocks tick, right? And I learned today that we have a whole lot more in common than I ever imagined. And, dude, thank you so much for being here today, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
This has been another episode of the Padernacht Podcast. And before I go, I have to give a shout out to the production team at Kai Visions. Mr. Claudio, the man behind the camera over there. None of this would be possible if it wasn't for him. So if you're looking for somebody to help produce your episodes, if you have a content idea, reach out to Claudio and see how he can help you out. My name is Steve Padernacht, and this has been another episode of the Padernacht Podcast, and I will see you guys next week.